people have gone online and called her a coward and a stupid bitch.
Does this mean people are turning to other industries, like other types of trafficking?
Facts don't matter to people as much as people think they do. Same queen, new look, try to keep up.
Senator Martha McSally, the first female fighter pilot to fly in combat for the U.S., shared a darker side of that experience for the first time at a hearing on how the military can prevent sexual assault.
I was preyed upon and then raped by a superior officer. I stayed silent for many years, but later in my career, as the military grappled with scandals and their wholly inadequate responses, I felt the need to let some people know I too was a survivor.
Doctors have used ketamine off the books to treat depression for years, and now the FDA has approved the drug in the form of a nasal spray. The lower dose esketamine shows similar success rates in treating severe depression, but has a lot of the same risks as the party drug, including the possibility of addiction. To get a dose, patients will have to go to a doctor's office and pay up to $885. Prosecutors in Greece are charging 20 people, including government officials, with arson, negligent manslaughter, and bodily harm over a wildfire that killed 100 people last year. Reports described a chaotic evacuation, with a lack of alarms and roadblocks that pushed drivers into the fire. The accused denied any wrongdoing. The U.S. trade deficit, the difference between the value of products that the U.S. imports and what it exports, hit a 10-year high in 2018. The deficit grew by $140 billion since President Trump took office, despite his promise that tariffs would do just the opposite.
We are going to start whittling that down, and as fast as possible.
A massive, decade-long study out this week confirmed, once again, what scientists have known for years. There is no link between vaccines and autism. In the 1950s, measles infected some 3 million Americans a year. A vaccine changed all that in 1963. And by 2000, officials declared the disease eliminated from the US. But it's made an unexpected comeback due to anti-vaccine sentiment.
I know, baby. You're gonna be mad at me a little bit, okay? I'm sorry, baby girl.
Okay. Shh. It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
I know.
Almost done.
Okay.
Last one. Hold still. She's strong.
The percentage of my patients who aren't completely vaccinated is probably close to 25%.
That's pretty high.
It's pretty high.
Dr. Luke Voitas is highly attuned to the vaccine culture war. Today, he's vaccinating 2 of his patients. His practice is in Vancouver, Washington, the epicenter of an ongoing measles outbreak. Since the beginning of the year, there have been 70 confirmed cases here. How bad is measles?
Yeah, measles is a bad illness. If you are exposed to someone with the measles, you're not vaccinated, you have a 90% chance of getting it. Most people don't die from it, but about 2 out of 1,000 do, which is scary when that's your kid who's sick.
When a parent comes in and says, no vaccines, I don't want to do any of them, how do you approach that?
When I started 10 years ago, I got pretty fired up by that. I mean, I was fresh out of residency, and I would come at them with all the science, all the studies of how safe it was, how bad those diseases could be. I mean, I'd get into 20, 30-minute conversations about that.
And how would that go?
They'd listen politely, they'd nod their head, and they'd refuse all the vaccines. People know I'm not going to kick them out, so maybe I attract a few more of those patients than other doctors.
But you see that as an opportunity?
Absolutely. I want to work with those families. Good talking, Hudson. What we'll have to decide on today is what we want to do with flu vaccine.
If I had my flu shot and he's breastfeeding, does that help him at all? Or just...
Yeah, so not really. Breastfeeding helps with everything. That makes him less likely to get sick in general, but specifically for the flu, not so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then, let's go ahead and just get it to be safe.
Have you actually had success in changing parents' minds?
Yes.
Cerise Wilson is one of those parents who changed her mind. I have had an opportunity to meet one of your patients, Cerise, and she has gone through a journey. Can you tell me how that actually happened?
Like most parents, she was nervous about some things, but really nervous about vaccines. Just in her social group, she had gotten a lot of information in both directions. And we just talked about it a little bit. We said, I'm never going to force you to do anything. We're going to talk about it now. We're going to talk about it at 2 months and 4 months. I gradually saw Cerise and her husband become more comfortable with vaccines over those first few months.
You know, yeah, it wasn't autism. That was never the fear in that. I was more concerned about, you know, you hear about brain swelling, and like really scary things.
When did you first hear about the measles outbreak?
My sister had called me to tell me that there were a few confirmed cases in the area.
And what was your reaction?
Oh shit.
All right, well.
Cerise reconsidered her stance shortly before the outbreak. Her mother was diagnosed with cancer in October of last year. So she decided to vaccinate her baby, 15-month-old Everett, to prevent him from making her mother sick.
I had to weigh the decision. How would I feel if he got something that there's a vaccine for and I didn't do it?
Is Everett currently on track right now with his vaccines?
By 18 months, he'll be caught up.
You said you've done the research. You had also been doing a lot of research beforehand. So it kind of sounds like your opinion of the sources that you trust has also changed.
Well, when there's emotions involved, it's hard for concrete facts to actually influence you because anxiety is a real thing.
How divisive is this issue in your community?
I have just been horrified at how vindictive it's been. People that I have always appreciated, seeing them on social media calling people that don't vaccinate baby killers.
Some of those messages are directed at Cerise's mother, Linda Wilson. She's a state senator representing parts of Clark County.
Because my mom hasn't discussed the legislation, just recently people have gone online and called her a coward and a stupid bitch.
Senator Wilson plans to vote no on a proposed bill that would eliminate one of Washington's non-medical vaccine exemptions, the philosophical exemption. Where do you stand on vaccines?
Well, obviously, I can be pro-vaccine because I did vaccinate my kids. I do believe that we need to do those, but I don't believe that everyone should be having to do them.
When the outbreak erupted in Clark County, the number of measles vaccinations administered to children spiked to 5 times the average.
The government didn't make them do that.
No, the measles outbreak did.
Right. They decided to make that decision on their own to go get the measles vaccine.
But it took an outbreak for that to happen. Is that how things should go?
The cases are coming from out of the country. So, maybe what we should do is start thinking about requiring vaccinations if you're coming into our country. Maybe they should be vaccinated instead of requiring all of our people to be vaccinated regardless.
Why does it make more sense to ask people who are coming into the country to get vaccinated as opposed to people inside the country?
Well, they're being responsible here inside the country, right? We're a very well vaccinated country.
Sorry, I find that a very interesting way of looking at things because clearly Clark County is actually not well vaccinated. If the bar for responsibility is to vaccinate children, then saying that we should force people outside of the country to do it as opposed to people inside of the country, it sort of seems contradictory.
If that's where the disease is coming from, that's where I'm thinking that we should be looking at.
What is your responsibility as a politician?
My responsibility is to listen to my constituents and to hear both sides of an issue. I mean, there's been so few deaths along the way in years and years.
Because vaccines work?
No, I'm talking about measles, people that got the measles. There's very, very few deaths, but there have been more reactions to the measles vaccine and causing illness in whatever case it is.
You believe that? You believe that the measles vaccine has caused greater pain
if I listen to my constituents,
and harm than the measles itself?
I think that in this case, yes.
Have you talked to any doctors, scientists about this? No.
I'm kind of busy up here, and so I'm just dealing with what I'm getting from my constituents.
When House Democrats took over in January, President Trump's critics fantasized about all the ways Nancy Pelosi and company could finally take Trump down. A lot of those fantasies involved the House Judiciary Committee. This week, the committee's chairman, Jerry Nadler, made his first move when he requested documents from 81 people and organizations in Trump's orbit. Nadler's list is a who's who of Trump henchmen, from his sons to campaign architects and administration officials. And the documents Nadler is asking for cover all the greatest hits of the last 2 years. He wants details about the firing of former FBI Director James Comey, the plans for a Trump Tower in Moscow, and any talk of pardons for Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort. It's safe to assume that other committees, prosecutors, and special counsel Robert Mueller have requested this same trove of documents or already have them. So this is basically an insurance policy for Congress. If the Attorney General doesn't take them public once Mueller hands them over, Nadler will try. But it may be a long time before that insurance policy pays out. Mort Rosenberg was a specialist at the Congressional Research Center for over 30 years.
What they're doing is sending a message out. And the message is, we want answers to questions that were raised about operational matters as well as other ethical matters, before Trump was elected and took office, that have been denied. And the 81 persons, institutions, and whatever it is are on notice.
The targets of Nadler's requests can either turn over the information, try to negotiate with the committee, flat out refuse, or claim executive privilege if they work or used to work for the administration. That's when Nadler could turn to a legal move that has taken on a mythical status in the Trump era, the subpoena. But Nadler's team likely won't press for every document, because getting thousands or even tens of thousands of pages would just give them another problem, getting through them. Instead, Rosenberg thinks the committee will pick a handful of fights over key documents that they think the courts will agree they should have access to. Even so, Congress will still run into all the same roadblocks: delays, denials, claims of executive privilege. The cases will end up in court, probably until after the 2020 election, and maybe longer. And this isn't because the Trump administration is uniquely obstructionist. Remember Fast and Furious? Not that one. The one in which then Attorney General Eric Holder oversaw an operation dubbed Fast and Furious that allowed illegal gun sales so that the US could try to track the weapons to Mexican drug criminals. The congressional investigation followed the playbook. In 2011, committees subpoenaed Holder for documents. President Obama claimed executive privilege. Congress cited Holder for contempt, which kicked things to the courts. 8 years later, they're still there. So if you were expecting to spend the weekend reading the Trump Organization's financials, you may want to make some backup plans. But if you're patient, Rosenberg says it may pay off.
Can you guess how many times a court has, since U.S. versus Nixon, has upheld an executive privilege claim? Well, because there are none. They've never won a case because it's a qualified privilege. And the qualification is if Congress wants to get it and they need it, and there's no other way they can get the information, then they should have it. And if there was an impeachment, they couldn't even claim executive privilege. In fact, one of the grounds for the Nixon and Clinton impeachment was too much executive privilege claims and obstruction of investigation. So, you really got an interesting situation here. I'm so old, I may not see the end of it.
In Agadez, the prisons are full.
Combien de personnes en total?
22, 23. Chaque chambre. But many of the prisoners are not from Niger. They're migrants from across Africa.
Mon ami était Italie, il m'a appelé. Italie là, c'est bon. Si je venais là-bas, peut-être je vais trouver quelque chose, je vais aider mon parent. Oui, de ça, j'ai quitté là. J'ai quitté, je voulais partir là-bas.
Like many others, John and Seydou were arrested as part of an EU-funded crackdown on migration.
The road is almost closed because the police, the military men, and everyone, they are very, 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 very serious. That's why I was even unfortunately arrested, because they are ready to interrogate and to investigate on everyone.
For years, migrants from the West African peninsula transited through Niger on their way to Libya and then on to Europe. But in 2016, under heavy pressure from the EU, Niger began implementing a law criminalizing migration. Europe agreed to disperse €1 billion in development aid over 4 years if Niger began patrolling the desert, confiscating pickup trucks used by human traffickers, and rounding up smugglers and migrants. Without a wall or a fence, Europe cut down its migration flow by almost 90% since its height in 2015. But this success has side effects that EU politicians acknowledge could be causing even bigger problems.
It has gone underground. We have seen a larger and more well-organized networks, so that more organized crime taking over, and that certainly cannot be seen as a security progress in any way.
How much responsibility does the EU take?
I think the EU, by its aim now to put the border further and further away from Europe, so it's externalizing its borders, even down to here in south of Sahara, trying to block migrants from reaching Europe. So I think the responsibility is fully European.
How many people do you fit in this?
This
How many
one
people?
I can take 25, 30.
So each truck ride, you can, if you have 25, 30 people, how much in total can you make?
2 million.
2 million CFA. So that's like, that's more than $3,000 just for one truck.
Yeah.
Kawal used to have a thriving business smuggling migrants from Niger to Libya before authorities seized his pickup.
After the new law came in, what's been the consequence?
The consequence is a lot of young guys, they don't have any job to do. And so many people also they are benefited from this immigrant.
So does this mean people are turning to other industries, like other types of trafficking?
Yeah, some they're moving for the other trafficking. Yes.
Like what?
Yeah, different things. So,
drugs?
Some is drugs, yeah. Some is medicine, tablet.
Oh, wow. All of these bags are filled with drugs that have been seized from traffickers. Down here?
Niger says drug smuggling has soared over the past 2 years.
C'est les drogues? They've got all kinds of drugs. This is literally a cave under the prosecutor's office. On peut voir ça? That's all cannabis.
Toutes les caves, vous avez vu les deux autres caves, celle-là, tout est rempli. Nous avons des difficultés maintenant à la stocker.
Quel type de drogue?
Tramadol, diazépam, cannabis, il y a aussi un peu de la cocaïne.
Ça, par exemple, la jaune?
Les jaunes,
tu peux me montrer?
Ça, c'est du tramadol.
Ça, c'est tramadol?
Tramadol.
This is something that we're told the armed groups, Islamic State fighters, are using. It gives you more force.
Force.
Oui?
No, oui.
Okay.
The seized drugs will be incinerated, but that's just a small portion of what's passing through this former migrant route. Some of the drugs wind up in the hands of militant groups like the Islamic State, and it's not the only way ISIS benefits from the trade vacuum.
Wow. Okay, there's quite a lot here. Je peux toucher?
Yep.
Niger has always been a transit point for weapons going north to Libyan fighters or south to Boko Haram. But according to international watchdogs, increasingly attacks are taking place in Niger itself, further destabilizing the region.
C'est quel type? Est-ce que... AK? Ça, c'est un AK? Et ça?
Kalachnikov.
Thank you.
No problem.
It wouldn't be the first time that international efforts have backfired here, and smugglers are already finding new routes. The European Commission says Morocco has seen an increase in migrant arrivals.
So how do you find a way around the new restrictions?
The desert is big.
It's
easy you cannot look everywhere from this desert. It's so big. So if you know desert, you can find a way.
Hello, my children. It is I, the darkness within. Talking, talking, talking. Hands, gesturing. Ooh, that's scary.
Natalie Wynn is trying to de-radicalize YouTube. She uses 15 wigs, $1,000 in props, and hours of makeup to make 30-minute videos about the political fights of the internet.
Let's discuss this. And by discuss, I mean you sit quietly and I'll tell you what to think.
This is how political ideas spread. 200 years ago, it was pamphlets. 30 years ago, it was magazines. Now it's YouTube. The problem is it can be a bit of a radicalization machine. You search for what is the West. The first results are fine, but YouTube starts suggesting more and more right-wing content. And eventually you hit a white power video talking about Black people's IQs.
All that stuff, it's very last season. I'm kind of over it.
That's where Natalie Wynn comes in.
ContraPoints, the internet show where we talk about sadness, fascism, sexual deviation, cults.
She creates dialogues between characters and plays all of them. She writes, films, edits it all herself.
How could I possibly be a Nazi?
The result is a pretty complex discussion about subjects like the alt-right, transgender pronouns, climate change, capitalism, incels.
What we have in our hands here is more than a bunch of angry internet misogynists. It's, at worst, a kind of death cult.
She's trying to pull people away from the far right and nudge the left into doing better.
Everyone is going to look back on people like you, and they're going to hate you so much for what you allowed to happen to this planet. Well, those are future people. I'm alive now. I am fighting against the kind of reactionary forces that will cause people to double down on their reactionary ideas. I'm changing people's minds. I'm softening them to these issues. I don't want toleration, damn it. I want converts.
A year ago, she had 83,000 YouTube subscribers. Now it's almost 500,000. Her top videos get over 1 million views. She's in the top 20 creators on Patreon, a site where fans can give monthly donations to artists. It's more than enough for this to be her only job.
Why don't we fight the pageantry of fascism with pageantry of our own? And you know who's gonna make that happen? Who? Well-funded trans women.
It wasn't always like this. Natalie quit a philosophy PhD program in 2015. She moved to Baltimore for a relationship, which promptly failed.
I dropped out of grad school. I was like, I'm gonna write fiction. That didn't go anywhere. I was like driving Ubers, just teaching piano lessons, being a paralegal, doing copywriting, just like anything. It was because of a certain like dark moment of my life that I even thought to do something so suicidal as make video responses to alt-right people. Western culture is being destroyed by cucks and by gender bending, intoxication, and sodomy. You know, things that have never happened in Europe.
What makes your videos unique is that you are not obsessed with fact-checking every lie uttered by the president or by a white supremacist or a misogynist, that you look at the arguments undergirding their ideas and try to unpack those. Why did you decide to do that?
Facts don't matter to people as much as people think they do. People don't believe because of facts and evidence. They believe things because they're part of a story that they tell themselves. And so I guess part of what I'm doing is understanding those stories and understanding psychologically why are these stories being told.
And who sees themselves as the most rational guys in the room? Often young white guys, her primary targets.
Look, if your ideas stand up to rational scrutiny, why aren't you willing to discuss them in the free marketplace of ideas? Well, I'm going to discuss them in the free marketplace of ideas as soon as you get out of my room.
How do you think about what will draw in, the angry 21-year-old white guy?
I mean, what really, and they obsess over is this kind of free speech thing. Mm-hmm. To them, it seems terribly oppressive to have to constantly capitulate to these activists who want them to stop saying certain words or to have to, use the correct pronouns for trans people. That privileged obliviousness is something that I was raised with, and I do find it possible to put myself back in that mindset for the purpose of persuasion. Hi, boys. It's Points again. Same queen, new look. Try to keep up.
One reason Natalie is an unlikely missionary to those guys is that they often relish in belittling people like her, trans women.
I get so many comments at the beginning. Speaking as a straight white male, it's just like, okay, here we go. Yeah, sometimes they're nice comments. I know how rare it is to change someone else's opinion on the internet. I gotta admit, you really have opened my eyes. This old redneck trucker enjoyed your video much. I'm trying to learn what the world is now that I'm no longer in the disconnected ether of commercial transportation. ContraPoints woke me up and pulled me out of the rabbit hole of the alt-right, and I didn't wake up until someone more smart than I could actually spell it out for me.
Really excited to see your presentation.
I'm glad.
Some see her as a champion, like these art school kids she spoke to recently.
Please join me in welcoming to the stage the woman The Verge once described as the Oscar Wilde of YouTube, Natalie Wynn.
A lot of people traditionally have been shut out because they're doing work that simply an editor or a publisher is going to look at it and be like, what? Like, hi, I'm like a trans woman. I want to do comedy about fascism. Like, not that many people are like, yeah, here's a bunch of money, go do it. I think that this is a piece of a strategy. It's not a whole strategy. And I certainly do not claim to be able to single-handedly achieve much on my own. I'm just dealing with opinions. Well, I live for trans jokes. I just don't think cis people are very good at telling them because they don't know enough about trans people to know what the funny things are. I see myself as sort of like the left's immune system. No more than that. So, those are my thoughts. Like, comment, and subscribe. The end.